Keto Freaks. This is Carl. Do you or someone you know have trouble focusing? You know what I'm talking about. You sit down to read something, try to figure out your monthly budget, write that novel you've been putting off, or maybe you just can't seem to do one task at a time. Well, you may not know this, but I'm a musician as well as a software developer. Programming is a job that requires focus, long periods of uninterrupted work. It's hard for them and for you. I've created Music to Code By. This is music, yes, but it's specifically and scientifically designed to promote focus. Studies show that when math students were exposed to Baroque music between 60 and 80 beats per minute, they did better with comprehension and testing. So I created more modern music that is neither boring nor distracting, but falls within that tempo range. It's just the right mix. I also made the pieces 25 minutes long. That correlates to research that shows we all get brain fatigue after 20 or so minutes of hard focus. The result is thousands of happy customers. Now, you don't have to be a programmer to reap the benefits of Music to Code By. It has been known to soothe restless pets, calm fussy babies, and even help autistic kids relax and fall asleep. Listen to some free samples at musictocodeby.net. Welcome back to Two Keto Dudes. I'm Carl Franklin from Connecticut in the United States, and in February of 2016, I put myself on a ketogenic diet to take control of my metabolism. In that time, I managed to reverse all my markers of type 2 diabetes with diet alone.
Hi, I'm Richard Morris in Canberra, Australia. I've been on a ketogenic diet for over 2 years. When I started, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. Within 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet, all of my biomarkers of disease had disappeared.
We're going to share the progress of my journey through ketosis and Richard's experience thriving for years in ketosis, and hopefully that might help a few people who are curious about this kind of dietary hacking.
Yeah, that's right. We're not doctors. We don't want to give anyone any medical advice,
right,
but we are keen to share our own experiences. We're actually both software developers, so we're not afraid of a little technical detail.
Nah.
We've done some research into our own deranged metabolisms and the science behind them, and we hope to share some of that research. Where possible, we intend to put links in the show notes to cite the research supporting any claims that we make.
You'll probably work out pretty quickly that we're both foodies. We're going to share some of the great food we eat on this diet, and every episode we both share a recipe for an essential keto meal that we eat regularly.
Yeah.
So, let's start podcast number 16, The Heart Disease Show. So, Richard, do we have any corrections or apologies from last week?
Actually, I just noticed one today. It's not really an apology, but it's a slight nuance that I want to mention. You mentioned last week that my lipoprotein subfraction analysis showed that I was just fine. But I think there is a nuance that we can discuss in this show because it relates directly to the dyslipidemia associated with cardiovascular disease, which is the subject of our show. So it's probably better to say I'm mostly fine, and we'll go into a bit more detail about that later on.
All right, great. So just to reprise, which we do every show, let's talk about what a ketogenic diet is. Richard?
Sure. So a ketogenic diet is not eating carbohydrates.
Right.
You're basically just restricting your carbohydrates to less than 20 grams a day. You're not going out of your way to eat anything with carbohydrates in, but if some vegetables that you eat have trace amounts of carbohydrates, that's all cool. You probably get under 20 grams a day, and that's just fine. So you don't get any energy from eating carbohydrates. You eat just enough protein to maintain all your muscles, and there's a calculation for that, and you can go back to the protein show to find all that out. Mm-hmm. And everything else is fat. So you're fueling your body entirely on fat.
And the whole idea is to get to this place called fat adaptation. And when you're fat adapted, you can essentially burn the fat that is on your body for fuel, and therefore you don't have to eat as much fat to get the same effect.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Once you get fat adapted, you dial down the amount of fat on your plate and your body takes it from your body fat. and you can coast all the way till you get to your perfect weight. And once you do, you can start to increase the amount of fat on your plate, and then you're totally in control of how much energy your body stores.
And Richard and I are also in this phase now of intermittent fasting, which is sort of, once you become fat adapted, it becomes a really, really great strategy for continuing to lose weight and bust through plateaus.
And I recommend people go to the fasting show to hear more about fasting strategies.
And the plateau show as well.
And the plateau show. In fact, we've got about 15 shows in the can. You might want to have a listen to some of those.
Yeah, that's right. Catch up on them.
Yeah.
You might notice that my voice sounds a little froggy. Well, I'm still not over this cold, and it's been 2 weeks since we recorded the last show, which I was a little froggy then. This virus is really kicking my butt.
Oh, yeah.
So
we're going to be a bit rusty this week.
That's right. Fortunately, I'm not the only one. There's something going around. My doctor told me that she has patients that she's been seeing for 6 weeks or more.
Wow.
That still have the virus, and it does tend to go away after 6 or 7 weeks. So that I'm in for the long haul.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, anyway, so how are you doing? You just got done with a huge bike ride.
Yeah, I did. It was like a spur of the moment thing, well, maybe a spur of the week thing. I decided I did a big bike ride last week, and it was my normal. Well, I guess it was my normal Sunday bike ride. I do about 50 kilometres on a push bike, riding around the lake in the middle of Canberra, and every sort of once a month, I try to do a 3-day fast. It's part of my strategy for keeping my insulin down. And I did it last week on the bike. And at the end of my 55 Ks, I was so keen to ride some more. But I was with Julie, and she had enough riding for the day. So we decided to quit then. And I thought, next time I go out, I think I'm going to try 3 times around the lake.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I was
Which is about 50 miles or
it's
70, 80, 90 kilometers you rode?
I ended up riding 90 kilometres, 90.1 kilometres, and I think it's about 55 miles. So,
Jeez.
I know. I never thought I'd be that guy, the guy that goes out on a Sunday just for fun and goes and rides 50 miles,
How long did it take you?
It took me about 4 hours, so it was quite a decent. And the other thing was I was fasted for 48 hours in advance.
Yeah.
So we were talking before about running on fat. I did that entire 50-mile bike ride at a fairly decent pace. I was going about 24 kilometres an hour, so it's not too bad a pace. And I did the entire thing purely on my body fat. So I didn't eat it. I didn't take any food with me. I took some water with some salt in it and some branched chain amino acids that I add to it. I've only just started doing this.
And you weren't hungry and you didn't bonk. And that's what would have happened if you were a glucoburner.
Yeah, if you're a glucoburner, you only have about 2 hours worth of extreme exercise energy. This is one of the reasons why a marathon is what it is. It's a 2-hour running race because after the 2 hours, people bonk. They run out of their short-term glucose storage called glycogen, and all of a sudden their bodies are not able to efficiently get energy out of their body fat because their bodies are adapted to glucose, and their brain runs out of energy. And literally, you see these people sitting on the side of the road. The first thing that happens is that they get the shakes because their adrenal system goes into overdrive, trying to make more glucose, trying to goose the liver to release more glucose. The liver doesn't have any to release. And they start getting foggy, start having hallucinations about food, and they get massive depression. So you see these people in ultra marathon races who are sitting on the side of the road just crying.
Wow. And
that's why, it's insane. One of the things about a ketogenic diet is that you have the ability to rapidly access body fat. It's one of the adaptations of becoming a fat burner is that you're able to access body fat as fast as you're able to burn it. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the adaptation process. And most people, it takes about 6 weeks to get adapted, and then you become over the next, 3 to 6 months, you become really good at the process. But you certainly you have no energy problems after about 6 weeks.
And you've been losing weight steadily for the last couple of weeks?
Yeah. So I lost about 15 pounds over the past month. And
Great.
Now, of course, some of that is hydration. I've just exercise now for about 4 hours, and so I've become a little bit dehydrated. So, for every litre of water is a kilogram of body weight. So I'll slowly rehydrate over the next 12 hours or so, and I think I'll probably have ended. I'll maybe go backwards about 4 pounds, but it's certainly an impressive month. So how are you going, Carl?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. I'm down 55 pounds.
That's awesome.
Total from when I started. Last week, I told you I did a fast for a couple of days to try to kick the cold, and it worked for a while, but then the cold came back. And also, I told you about my excursion to Taco Bell, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you remember that?
Yeah. You didn't do that again, did you?
Well, no. I haven't done that again. But what was interesting was I did a little, cha-cha dance on the last show because I didn't really gain anything. Well, yeah, it came back, of course.
Taco Bell.
Yeah. I just hadn't given it a chance, apparently.
You probably lost so much water from your gig.
Maybe.
Because you were working hard during the gig.
Right. So it took me a few days to get back to where I was. But, in the grand scheme of things, it's not discouraging at all.
Nah, get back up on the horse.
Absolutely. This is a long-term strategy for me. I'm definitely not giving up because of that. That's silly. But every time that I feel like I can elevate above the laws of physics, it does come back to smack me. So anyway, I'm feeling great other than this chest cold. My head feels awesome and my body feels good and strong. And I'm still keto. Keto or go home, man. So in short, Richard, I'm doing great. I feel fine. I'm down 55 pounds and going, continuing to go and staying away from Taco Bell.
Yeah, that's a sound strategy. Awesome. So we should probably talk about our new Facebook group, which we've had running for maybe a month now.
Yep.
And it's really, there's what, about 300 people in there?
Yeah, almost 300 people in there. And it's called 2 Keto Dudes. And it's all one word. There's no spaces. 2 Keto Dudes. And there's an easy way to get to it. You can go to fb.2keto.com and that'll bring you right to it. It's also linked on our page, of course.
Yeah, it's a closed group because we don't want spammers in there sort of advertising rubbish, which always happens in open groups.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is apply to come in. We don't need to know you.
That's it. So I guess it's time for
Mail.
We're justified and we don't need no alibi.
Mail. Listen to my voice. It's terrible.
Yeah, voice is broken.
I can't do Barry White this week. All right.
Gingivitis. So I actually, on the way back from my bike ride, I rode up to my letterbox and guess what I found, Carl? Mail.
We have 2 comments from the Facebook group this week. The first one I'll start with is from Sandy McDormand Westbrook. And she says, someone told me about a way to eat carbs once a day and still lose weight. Is this true?
Oh.
And I think she had Taco Bell in her eyes like I did last week. But somebody answered no, unless they're leafy greens, cheese, nuts, or other keto carbs. But there actually is a diet called the Carbohydrate Addicts diet.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
The whole idea of this is you can eat within 1 hour a day, and you only get that 1 hour window. You can eat whatever you want.
Yeah.
And you see people eating big steaks and, bread and beer
Stuffing as
and all
much
this
as you
stuff.
possibly can in that window.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what do you eat for the rest of the day? You eat fat.
No, for the rest of the day, you are supposed to have only low carb and low fat foods.
Right.
So protein only.
Oh, no.
So I have tried this on several occasions because that seemed like the holy grail to me.
It's a stupid diet.
It
really
never
is.
worked.
No, that's stupid.
Well, it might work for some people.
Yeah.
But my metabolism is too deranged to handle that amount of carbs. So no, it doesn't work for me.
Carbs make me hungry. If I eat carbs, I eat more food. And that is the basis of diet for me. When I don't eat carbs, I don't get hungry. I can run off my own internal store. And I end up eating less during the day than I'm burning, and I'm slowly drawing down on my body stores.
So I've found that at this point on my journey, my blood sugar does go up and fat gets stored because I'm obviously gaining weight if I eat carbs, but I don't get hungry. Like, carbs used to make me hungry, but they don't anymore. At least I can't perceive the hunger. Maybe it's because now I know the difference between carb addiction and true hunger.
Yeah, I think possibly you may be becoming a little bit less insulin resistant, so you don't have as much of the compensatory hyperinsulinemia and then the reactive hypoglycemia, which is when you overproduce insulin. It overcorrects and it takes your blood glucose low, and then you got to get a Snickers bar in you, and I still have that. I mean, for me, if I eat any carbs, I turn into the Cookie Monster.
Yeah, I used to be that way when I was a carb burner. I would go low carb for a few days, and it'd be great, and then I'd get bored and have some cheese and crackers, and the next minute, like I'm down at 7-Eleven eating Ben & Jerry's.
Oh yeah.
That's the way I used to be.
Yeah.
But now, actually, I could do that. I could have the cheese and crackers and go to bed and not. Wow. But I don't.
No.
I don't.
No.
Yeah. Last week aside.
Yeah, last week.
I don't.
Last week an exception. Yeah. I find that the one thing I really like about keto is control. I find that I have amazing amount of control that I just never had before.
Yes.
I was out of control and I was not able to do anything at all about it because of the way my body was and because of the way the food environment is. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I was able to identify the elements in the food environment that were sending me out of control, I've developed an amazing amount of control.
Yeah.
So very happy with that.
It's amazing. I'm very much in agreement with you, sir.
Yeah.
You have a comment also posted in 2 Keto Dudes?
Yeah, I do. There was and this is actually a common thing that we've heard before. This is from Jay Letterman, and his comment was, still getting a lot of concerns and unaccepting attitudes from family members towards this diet.
Yeah.
Really started to lose weight and feel good too, and it totally bums me out when a loved one says they can't accept what I'm doing because it goes against traditional dietary norms. Mm-hmm. I feel like I can't explain myself or convince them what I'm doing is healthy and is working. Even after going to the doctor and getting great blood results, it still isn't enough.
Yeah.
Anyone ever deal with this, and any suggestions? And I
screw him.
Yeah, sort of. No, most people in my experience come early to the decision that the first rule of Keto Club is that no one ever talks about Keto Club.
Well, yeah, I tell you what, I used to get a lot of finger wagging from family members as well, and I was affected by it when when I would do it by myself and I didn't have the community behind me,
Yeah.
And I would go, it wouldn't be enough to shame me into going off it.
Yeah.
It's really a shame how that happens.
It
that
is.
People just, they wag their finger at you and tell you, you got to watch out, And when the fact of the matter is, it's an emotional response that has no basis in science, and you can prove them wrong. And if the numbers are on your side, they can go pound sand.
Show me the science. That's what it
Show
always
me the
comes
science.
back down to. Yeah, show me the science. Yeah, I find that I was actually lucky. My family I have a lot of doctors in my family, and none of them had an opinion until I'd already lost weight.
Right.
And then all of them said, "Wow, it seems to be working for you. Keep it up." So,
right.
That's...
Yeah. Yeah, so it might be a good strategy not to tell anyone until you're 40 pounds down or so. Right?
I do find that having a community is a good thing. It's reinforcing because nobody loses weight in a straight line. We all have swings and roundabouts, and some weeks, you will think you're eating totally keto and being extremely precise about everything that you're eating, and you're gaining weight or you're plateauing or, it's just not working for you. There's always somebody else in the community who's having some success, and so you can draw off some of that strength from other people.
So for me, there were 2 things that helped me resist that. One was all the science, watching Volek's videos and seeing all these people reading the study results is incredibly empowering.
Especially when they cite where it comes from, and then you can follow it back and look for yourself.
Right. Don't follow blogs that, somebody's opinion of all of this without any links to research.
That's right.
You have to back up what you say with science. Otherwise, it's just your opinion. And the other thing is, I had this I have this cold, right? Picked up a virus.
Yeah.
Now, my wife also has it because guess what? Viruses
are infectious. Yes.
They infect people and they go from people to people. And my mother, who I've talked about before, who is a staunch, cut out the fat, blah, 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 is in her 70s and she's not well. She needs a hip replacement. She's got Lyme disease a couple of times and, and she has a head cold right now. She's got a viral infection. Okay. So we went to my daughter's dance recital last night, which was great. My younger daughter. And we all met there and my mother was there and stuff. And she's going, putting her hands up when I come near, like, stay away from me. I'm infectious. I'm like, yeah, me too.
Me too. I tried you.
So, yeah, exactly. So, I heard from my elder daughter who was there that, quote, Grammy thinks you're sick because of keto.
Of course she does. And what's she sick because of?
And she's sick. And my wife, who isn't keto, is also sick, but I'm sick because of keto. Okay. Yeah. So here's what people do. They project their fears onto other people so they can more clearly see them. Yeah. And this is just a part of Psychology 101. When somebody's afraid of something and you remind them of what they're afraid of in themselves, they will project that onto you and then say that you're this and you're that and you're the other thing. And, this is a classic example of what's going on there.
Now, I'm surprised that she can't see that you look totally different. I mean, you look, I've known you for over a decade, and
55 pounds is a lot of weight.
Absolutely. I've never seen you so slim.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time it was. So the other thing that I got to mention, and this is germane to the comment, is that I, as I said before, I went to my doctor after losing, 30, 40 pounds, and she was amazed. However, she was afraid of my LDL spike, which happens on keto.
Right. Yeah.
Some people, their LDL goes down after 3 months, 4 months or whatever. Some people it goes up. Mine went up. And I said to her, do you have any evidence or show me the science that high LDL is a marker for heart disease? And she says, no. And I said, well, I just happen to have printed out a bunch of studies that show the opposite is true. Yeah. That low LDL is associated with heart disease. Not only that, but
dropping LDL is associated with it.
Yeah, a drop in LDL is associated with
people who drop over 14 years over the following 18 years have a higher risk of coronary event. Yeah,
that's right. So I said, if you're really concerned about heart disease, let's test for heart disease. Let's not test for cholesterol. And she said, fine. And I went for a carotid artery ultrascan, which tests the thickness of the arteries in your neck.
So how do they do that? Is it like they've got an ultrasound wand, like a pregnancy wand, but on your neck?
Exactly. It's an ultrasound wand. It looks like a little, like a shaver, it's about the face shaver size, and they just poke it into your neck and rub it around with some gel or whatever. And because she told me, my doctor told me that, I'll tell you what, I see in these people who look fine and everything, they have these strokes and heart attacks. And over again, we see plaquing, really bad plaquing in the carotid arteries.
Right.
So I went and got the ultrasound, and guess what the result was?
What were the results?
Clear.
Yay!
No significant
plaquing.
Sclerosis.
Wonderful.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I feel your pain, man. Even after losing weight and, lowering blood pressure, lowering triglycerides, which are really nasty.
Yeah.
And getting an artery test that showed my arteries are healthy. They're still saying
not happy.
They're still not happy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel your pain in this particular example, but I'm sure that I'm sure that someday you're gonna do some kind of test that makes her happy. But in the meantime, I'm sure you're happy with the weight that you've lost. And
well, I'm happy with me. And here's the thing that Richard and I really need to iterate over and over again is that we are not saying that if you do what I did, your arteries will be clear. No. I could have had arteries that have been clear all my life.
You must
I have
had,
no
yeah.
idea.
No, you must have had.
I don't know if the ketogenic diet helped that, or I don't know if there was plaquing before and now there isn't. I don't know that.
No.
All I know is from my experience.
Yes, and it's the same for me. All I can do is tell you my experience and show you any science that I've found that relates to my experience.
Right.
This is why we call the podcast Two Keto Dudes. We're not doctors.
Right.
We're not international book authors, or we're not even particularly knowledgeable or educated on the topic, other than we have a unique experience of having gone through this process before. If we make a statement, make an assertion, we'll do our best to try and find the science for it. And we hope that people listening to us who disagree with us are willing to find something to refute us, and we would love that. That would be wonderful. Absolutely.
That would make me very happy. All right, let's talk heart disease. So what is the science around heart disease, and what is it anyway?
You hear a lot of people talk about cardiovascular disease, and heart disease is a component of cardiovascular disease. Basically, it's a disseminated obstructed arterial disease. And it's caused by plaques narrowing the arteries. And what it does is it reduces the blood to organs that critically need a critical blood supply, like the heart or the brain. And so if you have a restriction of blood to the heart, it's called a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. And if you have a restriction of blood to the brain, it's called stroke. And this disease didn't really exist until the 20th century.
Yeah, it was like the 50s when it started, the Korean War.
Yeah, that's right. And it was mostly killing old, rich, white dudes like President Eisenhower.
Right. He had several heart attacks and then eventually died of a heart attack. But this was a really great case where he was told that it was fat. And so he went low fat and had more and more heart attacks.
Absolutely. He went low fat. The poor guy was eating like dry flour crackers with nothing on them. And he still had multiple heart attacks. And
worse.
Of course, what happens when you have a disease that's specifically striking rich old white dudes is a freak out.
Freak out.
He freak out. So everybody wants to throw money at it, right? So they spent billions on some of the largest research projects that the human race has ever done.
And they were all still suffering under the delusions of Ansel Keys' 7 countries study, weren't they?
Well, that's where all this came from, because once there was a freak out and people were throwing money at it, you have a lot of researchers putting effort into working out why it happened. And as I mentioned, that heart disease is caused by plaques narrowing the arteries, so cholesterol is found in these plaques, and so there was some study into working out how cholesterol gets into these plaques. And there was a theory that if you eat something that causes you to have higher amounts of cholesterol, you get more likely to have heart disease. And so, as I say, we spent billions of dollars into these studies to try and ferret out what things people were doing that caused their cholesterol to go up, and how that caused heart attacks, or how that was associated with heart attacks.
And you can also see how it really was obvious to these people, because they were still eating their carbs, but when they cut out their fat, their LDL dropped.
Yeah.
And that is true. If you go on a low-fat diet, your LDL will drop. So they figure, that's 2 false indicators right there.
Pretty much.
Because the real LDL, that's the problem LDL, is from your liver, and it's created when you eat carbohydrates.
Yes, well, we didn't realize this until the 1980s. But what we knew in the 50s was cholesterol was the problem. Yeah. And we had this theory that eating saturated fat causes cholesterol to go high, which causes cardiovascular disease. I should mention, despite the amount of money, the billions of dollars that have been put into proving this hypothesis, it's actually never been shown.
Right.
In fact, the null hypothesis that this is not a causal relationship has been proven multiple times.
And non-causation proves non-correlation, even though correlation does not prove causation.
Yes,
right?
It is. I mean, correlation doesn't show you much at all, but there is a root cause to heart disease, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on in the podcast. But we had this theory that cholesterol was the problem, and if you calculate the numbers, if you have a large enough group of people and you work out what their cholesterol rates were and what they're eating and how often they have heart attacks, you can see that there's a very weak association between total cholesterol and cardiovascular disease.
Right.
The problem is that nobody understood the mechanism.
Yes.
The theory was there's cholesterol in these plaques, therefore eating cholesterol or eating things that cause your cholesterol to go high increases your risk of a heart attack.
Right.
But cholesterol is used to shore up and fix. It's part of the repair mechanism of the plaque, clearing up inflammation.
Not only that, it's part of the metabolic process of life. If you take away cholesterol, you die.
Yeah, cholesterol is essential for most of your brain is made of cholesterol. Yeah. So, it's...
So it's a vicious cycle, right? You reduce the cholesterol in your brain and that keeps you stupid.
So it's
That's a joke, people. That's not science.
No. So the theory is that saturated fat in your food causes cholesterol in your blood, which causes heart attacks, which is, as I mentioned, has never been proven. But
Correct.
In 1949, we learned how to ultracentrifuge blood to separate out two different kinds of cholesterol: HDL, high density lipoproteins, and low density lipoproteins. And HDL is we've spoken about this during our cholesterol show, but HDL is protective. And we found that out from the Framingham study, from Framingham data in 1977. That showed us that there was a negative correlation between HDL and cardiovascular disease.
So the higher your HDL, the lower your risk of heart disease.
The lower your apparent risk of heart disease, that's right. LDL is still only weakly associated with cardiovascular disease. In fact, it's probably more accurate to say it is less strongly weakly associated with cardiovascular disease. Yeah. So it's more weakly.
And I'm walking proof of that. My LDL is higher, and yet my arteries are clear.
Absolutely. But one of the confounding factors is we actually found some ways to make drugs to reduce to lower LDL, statins.
Right.
In fact, there's a bunch of different drugs, but statins are probably the most famous and most well-known ones. And in 2008, Americans spent more than $14 billion on LDL-lowering medication.
Whoa.
So there's a big market in there. And some people wanted to put statins in the water supply or into condiments at McDonald's. So, you could get salt and pepper and statins to put on your burger. And it's insane because the number of people to actually treat to save a life with statins, if you are talking about a population of people who have already had a heart attack, it's like you have to treat 141 people to save one life. And people think when I go on statins, if I go on statins, it's going to double my risk or halve my risk of getting a heart attack. Well, no, it's going to increase your chance of surviving a heart attack by 1 in 141 people to treat. A lot of this comes down to the fact that doctors aren't great at math, so
they don't know the science of nutrition either.
Well, they don't. It's a demarcation issue. Early on, doctors decided they couldn't know everything, and so they hived off the field to dietitians and nutritionists. And doctors decided, okay, we don't need to understand any of this because there are professionals who can focus on this.
Right.
So where are we in the process now? We know HDL is good, but there are no drugs that can fix that. We've had a couple of drugs that will raise HDL, and they also raise heart attacks. So
yeah, and eating saturated fat raises HDL. We know that.
That's right. Well, saturated fat has very little to do with heart attacks, and that's been proven. Zoe Hargrave's paper last year showed that we never had sufficient evidence to actually reduce saturated fat in our diet. First of all, we thought, it's cholesterol because cholesterol's in the plaques. And then we thought, it's not total cholesterol. There's different kinds of cholesterol. There's a good kind and there's a bad kind.
Right.
So let's look at the bad kind and let's try and find some way of pharmaceutically lowering the bad kind. Well,
And that's essentially where doctors are today. They see that you have high LDL.
yes.
And there's only one LDL number on the test that they give you.
That's right.
And they put you on a statin. And that's all that they know. Most of the, that's the conventional wisdom.
Yeah, we've known since 1980, Ron Krauss discovered in 1980 that you could further subfractionate LDL with a machine called an ion mobility analysis machine. Mm-hmm. And it can actually separate LDL into different densities of lipoproteins. And he was able to show that small, dense LDL is the bad one. And all of the other LDLs are fine. So the question is, your total LDL number doesn't tell you anything about your risk of cardiovascular disease. You need to basically get this thing called the lipoprofile analysis. And I actually have mine in front of me. And
That's what that paper that you hear.
the paper that you hear in front of me is me showing to Skype so that Carl can see my chart, and it's a pretty
Looks like some nice colors.
There's lots of nice colours. In fact, it actually tells me. I mentioned at the top of the show that my lipoprofile analysis is mostly fine. There are 7 different categories of LDL, from light and buoyant, fluffy, pattern A, benign LDL, to small, dense, atherogenic, pattern B LDL. So 1 and 2 is the light and fluffy stuff, and then you have 3, 4, 5 is the intermediate stuff, and then you have 6 and 7 is the really, really bad stuff.
Okay.
I have some 3. I have no 4, 5, 6, or 7. Most of mine is 1 and 2. So most of mine is large and fluffy, but I have a little bit of intermediate LDL, and that may or may not be an issue, but there are some other things in my blood results that are going to go into a bit more detail, and that will actually give us a bit more information. So,
okay, so now that we know that not all LDL is created equal, and it's the really small kind that cause the problems with heart disease, where do we go from there?
Well, now we have to work out in what populations is that small, dense form of LDL high. And Austin et al. In 1990 showed that people who have high triglycerides also have high, small, dense LDL. And so it appears that the production of triglycerides, and for the most part, that's fat that's made out of excess carbohydrates by the liver and shipped off to the fat cells to be stored for short-term and long-term energy storage. So they showed the ratio of pattern A, that's the good kind of LDL, to pattern B, the bad kind of LDL, as your triglycerides go up. And it appears that around about 100 milligrams per deciliter of triglycerides, if you're above that, you have mostly the bad stuff. If you're below that, you have most of the good stuff.
So what were the results of your triglycerides on your blood test?
Well, my triglycerides in this last test that I had done were 128. So that's just over into the category of making some pattern B LDL. So that's not a good thing. Now, my last blood test a year ago, they were 100. So I was right on the mark of the demarcation line between the two.
Now, what were your triglycerides before you started?
My triglycerides when I started this were 1,111.
Oh my! So I don't think 128 is a problem.
No, I was Mr. Pattern B back then.
Jeez,
Yeah. So so I've had my at the time my HbA1c was 11.2. I'm currently 5.2. So I've been focusing for the past year on blood sugar, and because I'm type 2 diabetic, and because that's the most important risk factor for my health, I've been focusing on that, and I've been neglecting a little bit the lipids. And as you can see, my triglycerides have gone from 100 to 128. That's not bad, but it's not a direction that I intend to head. So so soon after I had my blood tests done, I started using a food diary again, and I'm being very focused about what I eat. And as you see, I've lost a lot of weight this month, and I'm putting that down to the fact that I'm eating mindfully. I'm calculating everything I'm eating. I'm not counting calories. I don't think counting calories is a useful activity, but
no, I don't think so either.
I am being aware of how much carbohydrate and how much protein I eat during the day.
All right, so let's talk about how the low carbohydrate diet affects and addresses cardiovascular disease, and in particular, these markers we're talking about.
Yeah.
With Richard and I, both of us have lowered our triglycerides. My LDL went up. My HDL went down, actually, after the first 2.5 months.
Yeah.
But I need to have another blood test soon. By the way, I'm getting a subfraction analysis this week.
Awesome.
And I'll bring that test, which will include all the LDL and HDL.
Yeah.
But we've also seen that, not only losing weight, but in most cases, LDL goes down over, after 6 months or so.
There's a good video online with Steve Finney talking about this process of why some people get an increase in LDL, and part of it has to do with the fact that all of our lipids are stored in our fat cells.
Right.
And lipids include triglycerides, which is body fat, and eaten fat that you're sending off to become body fat. It also includes your cholesterol, which is a lipid molecule. And so in your fat cells, you're storing both cholesterol and triglycerides.
Yeah.
They're carried together and they're stored together. So as you become a fat burner, you start now drawing down on that body fat. Yeah. You're dragging it out of your fat cells. Your fat cells now have cholesterol in them because they've lost some of their triglycerides, and that cholesterol basically comes out of the fat cell at the same time that your triglycerides come out. So
what Finney says is the cholesterol and triglycerides come into your bloodstream and then the liver flushes it out? Is that what he says?
Yeah, so what happens is the way that the body gets rid of cholesterol that it doesn't use is that the liver exports it as bile, which basically sticks it in the gut so that it can be used to help fats make their way through to be absorbed and out of the food, and then the bile goes out through feces. So literally for all the time that you're losing weight, you have slightly elevated cholesterol because your highways are full of cholesterol making their way out the back door. So that's why some people see a transient increase in LDL, and as soon as you stop losing weight, then that should settle down.
So the question is that dangerous? I mean, let's say that my carotid artery test came back, or let's say that somebody listening goes and does an artery test and they have plaque.
Yeah.
So now your arteries are plaquing and you're filling your blood vessels with fat that is being removed by the liver.
Yeah.
What's more dangerous, being fat and having high cholesterol and high blood sugar, or the fat moving away and being removed?
I think if you have signs of atherosclerosis, you really want to do a lipoprofile analysis to work out whether you're making small dense LDL.
Right.
And if you are, then you need to basically go on a diet that makes less SDLDL, small dense LDL. And as Austin et al. Showed in 1990, that is a diet that lowers triglycerides. And as Ron Krauss showed in 2005, a low carb diet reduces small dense LDL and increases HDL by lowering triglycerides. So literally a low carb diet will specifically target your production of small dense LDL and HDL and make you less atherogenic. Now, the interesting thing I was listening to on my bike ride, I listened to podcasts on my bike ride. I was listening to Aseem Malhotra, who is a British cardiologist speaking at a conference in South Africa, and he said that changes in the diet can change your atherogenic expression in your arteries in as little as 3 months. If you go for a test that shows that you're atherogenic, you're producing arterial plaques, changing your diet can fix this within in 3 months.
So I have some evidence of this. There's a link that I'll post here. It's an article that cites 23 studies of low-fat versus low-carb diets. And the article itself doesn't make the claims. It links to the studies, and these are scientific studies. They're not blog posts or whatever.
Yeah, I love blogs and articles, online articles that cite the references, because then you can go in and look for yourself.
Right. So what I don't like about this and these studies, that many of the studies are short term.
Right.
And not only is that not good for science, but it also gives the naysayers, something to poke you at. Well, that may be fine over 3 months, but what are the long-term effects, right? Well, what are the chronic effects of a ketogenic diet? Okay. But anyway, there were 2 studies, number 12 and number 20, that went on for a year, and 2 studies, 16 and 23, that went on for 2 years.
Nice. Is that the Israeli one that went on for 2 years?
There was a couple of them. Yeah, one was the Israeli one. Yeah. But here's one that went on for a year. The Atkins group had the greatest improvements in blood pressure, triglycerides, and HDL. The Learn diet and the Ornish low-fat diet had decreases in LDL at 2 months, but then the effects diminished.
That's the A to Z study from Chris Gardner's group at Stanford.
Yeah. That's right. And so that's sort of the opposite of what happens with a ketogenic diet, which is your LDL goes up in the first 2 months or 3 months or whatever. And as you're losing weight, it could.
Yeah. Some people it does. Some people it goes down. Some people it stays the same. So, it's not a great marker of anything. As I mentioned before, we kind of focused on it because we're kind of in the sort of the HDL good, LDL bad, 2 legs good, 4 legs bad kind of thing.
Yeah, this is where we are. This is where doctors are. They say LDL up. Okay, you're going on a statin. That's the only thing they'll bring it down. It's crazy. So anyway, I highly recommend you reading through all those studies. And what they do is they show you the scores and average them, and they show you the comparison with graphs of all 23 of these studies.
Yeah,
and it's remarkable. And guess what? The low carb diet wins.
Pretty much.
It's just better in everything.
That Chris Gardner study, the A to Z study, is awesome. You can actually, there's a video on YouTube of him presenting this to an audience, and he's actually a vegan, the guy, Chris Gardner, and he states during this presentation, it's entirely not what I expected to happen. I expected the Ornish diet to come out ahead of everything.
Yeah.
I'm a vegan, my wife's a vegan, I raised my kids vegans, and I totally wasn't expecting this. But what he did find was that in every population of these 4 diets that people were on, there were people who did well and did poorly.
Yeah.
And he came up with a hypothesis that you could find out whether somebody was insulin resistant or insulin sensitive, and you could predict which diets they would do well and poorly on. And he did a subsequent follow-up study that it came out, I think, just 2015, where he actually showed that that hypothesis had some legs. He was able to show that you could give some prediction by insulin resistant status on which diets. And people who were highly insulin resistant were better on the low carb diet, and people who were highly insulin sensitive were better on the low fat diet. And
it turns out there's more of us than there are of the insulin sensitive kind.
There's at least 52% of people in California, according to UCLA, are insulin resistant, either diabetic, pre-diabetic, or diagnosed or undiagnosed.
So how do I know that I'm one of these people? And, everybody says, they're listening and they say, I'm overweight, I have pounds to lose, I'm going to go ketogenic. And even people who have, 15, 20 pounds to lose might want to go ketogenic or think that they ought to, but how do I really know that it's going to work for me?
You can be overweight and still be quite insulin sensitive and just be eating too much food. But to become obese, you really need to be insulin resistant and to have a real problem with glucose metabolism. And that really kicks off the whole insulin resistant spectrum. So
okay, but you can also be thin and be insulin resistant.
Yeah, I think you really need to get a blood test to be able to determine that. There's a thing called a Kraft insulin assay, Kraft, K-R-A-F-T. It's named after Dr. Joseph Kraft, who's a pathologist, American pathologist, who did 15,000 insulin assays and thousands of autopsies of people. And he was able to come up with a mechanism for determining whether someone's insulin resistant 10 or 15 years before they become diabetic. before their pancreas gives up. And so that's actually, you really have to get an oral glucose tolerance test with insulin assay to be able to determine whether you're really insulin resistant. And that's going to tell you whether you're going to do well on a low carb diet or not. But I would say the easiest way is just try it. Try eating low carb and seeing if it gives you control over how much food that you're eating.
So, Richard, is small, dense LDL the only thing that causes cardiovascular disease?
No, we know actually that chronic high insulin will cause atherosclerosis. We've mentioned before about the dog study that showed that if you make a dog insulin resistant with chemicals so that you can give it a high amount of insulin without killing it, and then you do that in just one side of its body, one artery, that artery becomes fatty and sclerotic. So we know that insulin, the high levels of insulin, will make somebody atherosclerotic.
And they did that by injecting insulin directly into the arteries only on one side?
Yeah, into the femoral artery of a dog's. The femoral artery goes through the groin and goes down the leg and supplies blood to the legs.
Okay.
They put saline in one and insulin in another, and the one that had saline did not have atherosclerosis, and the one that had insulin had atherosclerosis, so it was fatty and sclerotic. So they were able to show that insulin specifically causes the inflammation that requires plaques to build up, and then they become thrombotic and blood clots and causing strokes and heart attacks and everything. So we know that insulin does it. Now the interesting thing is that a low carb diet specifically lowers insulin, and so we know that type 2 diabetics have an 8-fold risk of getting heart attacks over the general population.
Right.
Insulin and possibly small dense LDL could both be factors.
So it's a double whammy. If you have high insulin levels, you're going to have sclerosis.
Yeah.
And if you have small dense LDL particles, they're likely to get stuck and penetrate the artery walls that are inflamed. Double whammy.
Yeah, or they because they're small dense, they're oxidized and they're causing inflammation directly. So it's not so much. It doesn't necessarily have to be the fact that they're small and can get in there. It might just be that they're oxidized, they're nasty oxidized surfaces, and they do direct damage to the artery. And that's just two possible things that could be causing it. There could be lots of different factors that we all have.
Smoking is a huge factor. That's been shown.
Twofold increase of cardiovascular disease if you're a smoker. Mm-hmm. There are viruses and bacteria that can cause damage to your artery. There's all sorts of things. Leaky gut could potentially let proteins in that do damage.
Okay.
So a lot of things can cause inflammation. But two of the things, certainly small dense LDL has been shown to be associated with, and certainly insulin has directly been shown to be a direct cause of atherosclerosis.
So we know that, as I had this procedure done, a carotid intima thickness test or an ultrascan can give you a direct measurement of your carotid arteries.
Yep.
But are there other tests that, if this ultrasound isn't available, that you can ask your doctor for?
Sure.
That will give you a more concrete picture of your actual heart disease?
So I can think of at least one direct test, and I can think of several indirect tests, and some of them you can get with just a regular blood panel. So, for example, if your we've mentioned before, if your triglycerides are over 100 milligrams per deciliter, or millimoles, it's about 1. If they're over 1 millimole, you're going to be creating small dense LDL. That's going to be bad. If your HDL is high, you're fine. You're likely producing less small dense LDL. There's a study we can show you in Japanese subjects that showed that HDL is a very good specific predictor of small dense LDL. And triglycerides over HDL is a factor that you can calculate yourself. If it's less than 2, you're fine. If it's greater than 4, you're starting to get too high. If it's over 6, it's much too high. Probably the best diagnostic you can get is called a CAC score, or a coronary artery calcium score. And what this does is it's an X-ray of your heart with an electron beam, and it shows the calcium in your coronary arteries. And apparently when your arteries are plaquing up, they recruit calcium to shore themselves up. And you can actually see that with a X-ray using an electron beam. And what I would suggest people do if they're interested in coronary artery calcium scores is watch Ivor Cummins' presentation on the root causes of heart disease. To cut to the chase, he tells us that the root cause of heart disease is insulin, which I've already told you. But But what is interesting is he talks about an engineer's viewpoint of the science behind how to isolate the root cause of a disease. And in particular, he identifies that the coronary artery calcium score is the most accurate and most precise way of determining whether you have cardiovascular disease.
So in my case, I asked my doctor about this, and she said she had never heard of this test before, that she would have to refer me to a cardiologist in order to get that test done. There were no labs that she knew of that did it. She had never even heard of it.
So I had a CT scan with a contrast just this last week to have a look at my liver, and I was trying to see whether I still had fatty liver, and it turns out that I can show you a CT scan from 3 years ago that was a very fatty liver, and now I have a CT scan from now with an unfatty liver, and I'm going to take both of those models because they're three-dimensional computer models. I'm going to take both of those and 3D print myself a quarter scale version of my liver before and after keto. So
you're such a geek.
I know,
I love it.
I know. But so while I was getting my CT scan, I asked the lab technician, "Can you do a coronary artery calcium score?" And she said, "Yeah, that's an old test. Just about everybody can do that. Nobody asks for it anymore." So it's not like a modern, it's not like a recent thing. It's something that a lot of diagnostic labs can do. So
it's just easier to prescribe a statin and get you out.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to get myself a CAC score, probably get one next week because I'm going to see my doctor about the results of my CT scan. So.
Very good, Richard. Well, I'm looking forward to that. But now you know what time it is. It's time for
recipes.
Heard you say you're due for a little
recipes.
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 Awesome. So, Carl, what do you have for us this week?
All right. Well, my eating habits have really changed since I started. When I started my keto diet, I was all about bread substitutes and snacks like the cheese crisps and all the stuff that I could eat like that. Now I eat one meal a day, and that's enough for me. But I saw somebody posted in, I think it was Keto Ninjas, about this low-carb bread.
Nanette posted it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was in Two Keto Dudes she posted, I think.
Well, before that, I saw it in Keto Ninjas.
Right.
I can't remember who posted it in Keto Ninjas, but it's Mahler's low-carb bread. And, sandwiches are what I've lived on all my life. I love sandwiches. If I can't make them myself, I'll go through the drive-thru and get a sandwich. I mean, that was my MO. And so a lot of people can't imagine themselves giving up their great sandwiches. So Mahler's low-carb bread is only 1 net gram per slice. Let me say that again. It's a commercially available bread that's only 1 net gram of carbs per slice, and it tastes pretty good. It's made with flax and soy, and it just tastes like a wheat bread.
Nice.
Best when toasted or grilled.
But you probably can't have like half a loaf.
No, but I can have 3 sandwiches a day and stay under my limits.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So let me tell you about my lunch yesterday.
Sure.
I took 2 slices of Mahler's bread and toasted it nice and toasty. On one side, I slathered some mayo. On the other side, I slathered some pesto aioli.
Right.
So this is basil, garlic, cheese. It's like a pesto mayo.
Nice.
All right.
So I know where we're going here. We've got some tomatoes as well, right? Because
tomatoes,
if you got basil, you got to have tomatoes.
What I'm saying. Yeah, so I take 2 slices of ripe tomato, put them on each side, and I cut my slices, 1/4 inch thick. Maybe even a 1/2 inch. And so 2 slices, some pepper on that, and then bacon. And I'm talking about maybe 6 full slices, so half slices, 12. So baby, you know what I'm saying? I stack it up with bacon and a big chunk of iceberg lettuce. And,
lovely.
I can barely fit it in my mouth, but man, and that was just sandwich number 1. Sandwich number 2 was also Mahler's toasted bread with butter on it. And then 2 fried eggs fried in bacon grease.
Oh, yeah.
And with melted smoked Gouda slices on them.
Oh.
more bacon.
Oh, now I'm getting
on the
hungry.
sandwich.
Now I need some bacon, stat.
More bacon on the sandwich, and then that's it. And I was 2 pounds down the next day.
Oh, wow.
And by the way, that was lunch.
So that's a meal for a day.
That's my daily meal.
Yeah.
Come evening time, I sit out by the fire. I have a couple glasses of wine. I just enjoy myself. Next day, I'm 2 pounds lighter.
Nice. I've seen people do BLTs with no bread at all, and what they do is they weave bacon. They weave raw bacon,
Right.
put it on some greaseproof paper, put it in the oven, and bake it so that the bacon sticks together.
Yeah.
And they use that weave like in lieu of bread. So now I've seen that
Yep,
before.
I totally am down with that if you want to do it completely without bread. All I'm saying is that this Mahler's bread at 1 net carb
Yeah, that's awesome.
is great.
We have something similar in Australia called Herman Brot. It's made from a bakery in Queensland, and it's distributed through super barns and Go Vitas throughout Australia. So, and that's quite a good bread too.
So I'm looking forward to lunch after this podcast. That's my recipe, Richard. It's really not a recipe. It's a bread. And by the way, I just found out about this. Mahler's doesn't pay for us to say it. It's just
they should become a sponsor.
they should become a sponsor because it's a product that we like.
It is, and then we'd have a sandwich of the day.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, but I'm going to my recipe for today is mayonnaise.
Ah,
An emulsion is where you take very small droplets of a hydrophobic solution like fats and a hydrophilic solution like vinegar or mustard so you are whisking it into very, very small droplets, and you're using a chemical called an emulsifier. In the case of mayonnaise, most good mayonnaises are made with egg yolk, and in particular, they're using the lecithin, which is a chemical in an egg yolk, as the emulsifier. And so basically making a mayonnaise is a very highly rich, fatty sauce that you can use on things, such as a BLT. I'm going to give you a recipe for making about a cup and a half of mayonnaise. So you start off with an egg yolk and you put it in a blender that has an open attachment so that you can pour things in from the top. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting in some ingredients, we're going to be blending it, and then we're going to be slowly adding extra ingredients, and it's going to be the slow adding of extra ingredients that's going to make the emulsion. So we start off with an egg yolk, we add a heaped teaspoon of mustard. You don't want a seeded mustard, you want something like a Dijon or an English mustard. And then you want about 2 tablespoons of some kind of acid. Now you can use citrus like juice of lemon, or you can use vinegar. We like to use a mixture of both apple cider vinegar, a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and a tablespoon of lemon juice. And then you put a little bit of salt in, and you blend it up until the mixture is entirely mixed, so you can't see any differentiation between it. It's all the same color. And then you put in a drop of oil. You only need 1 drop, and you blend it. You put another drop in and you blend it again. And you do that 5 times until what you're doing is you're slowly introducing the oil into the mix so that it doesn't overwhelm things. If you just pour all of your oil in, you're going to end up with an oil and things that don't mix with oil.
Yeah.
But if you blend it as you go. The old way of doing this was you basically put a can of oil above your head that you're whisking with a hand whisk underneath, and you poke a hole in the can, you let oil drop in slowly.
Right.
But in the case of my technique, I'm just using a blender. I just start off with a couple of drops, and once it's fully mixed through, then I might add half a teaspoonful of oil.
Yeah.
And then I'll add another half a teaspoon, and I'll do that a couple more times. And then once you've done it maybe 5 times, half a teaspoon at a time, you're probably ready now to start dripping in the oil. And you just start dripping it in, and you make as much mayonnaise as you want. And there was a Michelin-starred chef, Raymond Blanc, who was curious one day how many eggs were required to make mayonnaise, because the theory was you always have 1 egg and you're making about a couple of cups of mayonnaise. And he thought, I wonder how many cups of mayonnaise that I could make. and he was able to use several 44-gallon drums worth of oil for one egg yolk.
No.
So it turns out that there's a very, very small amount of less than required to make mayonnaise.
Wow.
So you can, in theory, make mayonnaise. You can make a lot of mayonnaise with just one egg yolk.
Wow.
But if you like that nice eggy taste in mayonnaise, which I do,
Me too.
Then I'll use one egg yolk to make a whole cup and a half.
So there you go. You can use Richard's technique to make your own pesto mayonnaise, right?
Yes,
You
yeah.
just add some garlic and basil and some Parmesan cheese, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yum.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to make some
Yum.
of that. Now I'm going to make.
Me
now,
too.
You don't have to. Now the oil that you use, it could be. We used burnt butter the other day, so we made a mayonnaise out of burnt butter,
Like ghee.
Yeah, like a ghee. But we'd actually cooked it until it actually gone nutty and hazelnutty as burnt butter.
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
So,
Nice.
but you can use olive oil. You can use seed oils like grapeseed oil. So yeah. So that's my recipe for the day is mayonnaise.
All right, man. That's a show. Let's have a heart-healthy week, all, and eat lots of bacon.
Yep. Yeah. Look, if you have anything that you want to tell us, something we said wrong or something you don't agree with, some more research that you found to support or refute what we've said, send it by email to dudes@2ketodudes.com or post it on our website.
And join our Facebook group, 2 Keto Dudes. That's fb.2keto.com.
And we'll see you in the group.
Yeah, we'll see you in the group, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.